Okay, so the one piece of gear that I've sold that I actually regret selling was my Reddi, which is a tube direct box. I loved that thing. I actually sold it to a friend of mine, and my friend said that if I want to, I could buy it back. So I've been thinking about buying it back, and then I was like, can I justify the cost of such an expensive direct box? Does it really make that much of a difference? And then I was like, well, if I'm going to spend money on the Reddi, maybe there's something else that's cooler or better that I should try out as well. So then things escalated. Now I've borrowed like a bunch of direct boxes, and I have way more direct boxes in this room than any person should ever have in a room. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to record the same bass line through all of them. We're going to do a blind test where you have to pick out your favorite before you know which one is which. And I'm also going to make some of my friends do that, some of my trusted friends that have really good ears. So which direct boxes do we have today? Well, we have the Radial, which is a passive direct box. It's got a Jensen transformer in it. And then we also have the Colourbox, which is a preamplifier. And this has some character, right? I should say the ones of these that have character, I'm going to set them with character because that's what you're paying for. I'm going to dial these in a way that I think features them. And then we also have, this is my old Reddi. This is my friend Justin's. I sold it to him a few years ago, and I'm thinking about buying it back. You can see how huge this thing is and how heavy it is. Well, you can't, it's heavy, but all it has is just a big old gain knob. So I'm really excited to see how this lines up against the others. And then we have the Zod. I'm curious to see how these two bad boys do against each other because they're very similar. They're both tube direct boxes with just, I think, huge transformers in them. And then we have the popular Noble. I've never actually played a Noble. I've been hearing about these for years. A lot of friends of mine have used them. This is also a preamplifier, and it's got, the cool thing about this one is it's got power supply. And then we have Ampeg's SCR-DI. This has got this, what they call the scrambler circuit in it. So it's got some drive, and I'm going to try and dial in a pleasant amount of drive because that's part of what makes this unique. And then finally, we have our wild card. I went on Amazon and I found the cheapest direct box that exists for like $22. So we're going to throw this one in there too as a landmine to see if anybody falls for this, which I think would be actually kind of cool. That would like totally determine like this really doesn't matter. This is, let's just see what's in here. There it is. The Pyle PDC-21. It smells like plastic. In manufacturing. This is gonna be fun. One. Two. Three. Four. Five. Six. Seven.
I'm gonna be honest with you. If I heard any difference at all, it was maybe a difference of like 2% out of 100. I don't have a clear favorite.
Okay, that's fine. So why don't you listen to them soloed now? Because I think you're going to start to notice a lot more when it's soloed.
All right. Okay, here we go.
One. Two. Three. 5. Six. 7. 8. Pause the video and go ahead and write your favorite before we reveal them. There's no wrong answers. It's okay if you don't pick the one you were hoping for. This is about us learning what's actually making a difference and how much of a difference it's making. So, last chance. 3, 2, 1. Okay, here's what they were.
I'm actually quite nervous because my box is in this shootout. So I'm really hoping that I choose it. 3 is the most saturated, I think. Almost like warm saturation. 4 is almost fuzzy. You're getting almost kind of a hard clipping thing in that top end, which can be really cool. 2 was a nice balance. 3 was also a really nice balance. I really like 5. 5 is really well balanced. 6, I'm not feeling. It's kind of harsh to me. Mm-hmm. And I like 7 a lot. It's between 3 and 5 for me, and I think it's a toss-up.
If you're forced to choose at gunpoint.
I think it's 5 for me. I like 5. 5 is the most well balanced, and just out of the gate, that's exactly what I think I like. There's saturation there, but it's not overpowering. So if you want to go for more of a clean, sort of well-rounded bass sound, it's not giving you too much of that top end that like 4 and 6 are giving you too much of that hard clipping, almost fuzzy kind of thing. Uh-huh. And if you wanted that, like you were just saying, you can get that elsewhere. You can do that later. Right. I don't like that it's necessarily baked in. I don't like 6, and I don't necessarily like 4.
Like, let's say you're the producer on this track.
Yeah.
And you had to choose one right now. You're choosing 5.
I choose 5.
And the only one you're like, for sure I don't want is 6.
Well, but to kind of like maybe back out a little bit, if I'm the producer on this track and you showed up with any of these but 6, I'd go, yeah, cool, sounds great, let's roll.
Okay.
But of these, if I'm forced to choose, it's 5. Why are you smiling? God, is mine 6?
So it's time to reveal.
Oh my God. So 5 is the Noble.
All right.
6 is the Pyle.
What's the Pyle?
The cheapest direct box on Amazon.
How much does it cost?
$22.31.
All right.
Okay, so at least I got that right. I said, okay, so the 3 was the Ampeg SCR-DI.
Yep.
Okay. 5 was the Noble. So, okay, I've got good ears. I picked the most expensive one. Maybe not the best, but yeah, the Pyle sounds like a pile of shit. And the mix, that was the only, because it's doing that, it's shifting that low end and that mid range. It's like if you have the EQ spectrum, it's like doing that thing, and it's not what the bass should do.
Yeah.
That's fun. Nice track, by the way.
Oh, thanks, buddy.
Yeah, man.
First impressions.
I think number 5's probably like the I don't want to say gold standard, but like the one that's like right in the middle of all of that. Number 3 and number 6 are kind of a little more gritty. Probably wouldn't buy 4 or 7. It just like, I wrote bad grit. It's kind of mucusy. Yeah, so again, 1 and 5 are kind of like right down the middle, solid, like just good tone, good everything, kind of check all the boxes. And I wrote, for number 3 again, like I wrote like good grit versus bad grit. Like I would say number 4 has kind of bad grit.
Bad grit. You like the grit in 3 better than the grit in 4?
A lot better.
Okay.
And to that effect, number 6 had that same kind of grit, but also had a lot of like pop in the top end of things.
Yeah, so in like an unpleasant way.
No, I really liked it.
You like 6?
Yeah, it's if you're doing that kind of Jamiroquai-esque kind of stuff for Roy Ayers, like that top end stuff's gonna pop a lot better.
You are about to go into battle. You have to go record right now. You have to choose one of these. which one are you going to go with?
I think if it's just like any kind of recording, I'm gonna take number 5. That's just gonna check a lot of boxes in terms of what I might be walking into. Number 1 would probably work good as well. If it's a specific kind of session, 3 or 6 could be cool. I do kind of dig the tone you got with number 6 in like within the full track, but like isolated, it's a little weak.
Yep.
But it fit into the track really well.
Yeah. Okay. So in the context, you felt like it worked okay, but it like a lot of the times it might not work. Is what you're saying? Maybe.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the opposite with number 7. Like in the track, I really didn't like it. It didn't fit that very well, and it didn't sit good in the track. But isolated, it was actually kind of hip. Number 1 lets me really kind of hear the actual bass. Like I can tell that's your P bass. It's very true to the sound that those things get.
Okay. So it's like you think it's transparent.
Yeah, it's very true to the tone of the instrument.
Okay.
And I would say the same thing about number 5. But yeah, number 2 had more punch. 3 had that grit. 4, I still would just say no. You couldn't pay me to use that thing. And 5 again, like I think that's my one. The dynamic and tone range that thing gets was usually what I'm looking for. So again,
5.
like number 5 or number 1.
Nice. Now take a look.
Yeah, passive DI. That makes sense. That price is about. That's pretty nice actually.
Which one?
Number 1.
The Radial.
Probably my number 2 go-to.
Yep.
So I can already tell from like the price and what else I'm looking at. That's probably the best buy on this list to me.
The Radial.
Again, it's passive, so you got to know how to deal with that, and that might not serve you well in some bigger gigs, but for that price, like that's pretty damn good. Number 2 is the Reddi box. That's probably my number 3. I think that's what you got, right? The red box.
I don't own one.
But, you used to.
I used to. I sold it to Justin. I've been thinking about buying it back. And this video is kind of about me making that decision.
I got you.
So.
3, the Ampeg with overdrive. Yeah, I mean that was solid. That's what it's there for. Like, if you want that, that's what you should get. That's just a very specific thing to me. So.
You're talking about the scrambler circuit, like that saturation.
Yeah.
It's like you like it or you don't kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
All right.
Yeah, JHS Colourbox. I don't even know what that is. I would never spend that much money on something like that.
So I kind of like it could go anywhere from super clean to like fuzz,
yeah,
and I kind of set it right in the middle.
Okay.
So like I don't want you
that
to.
Might have just been the setting.
It might have been the setting, and
yeah.
I actually think the Colourbox is really cool. It's because it's so versatile, but it is a very specific flavor, and it's more like, do you like that flavor or not?
I did not, obviously. So my pick was number 5, which is the Noble, and that's the gold standard, I would say.
One.
Sounds pretty clean, good articulation.
2.
That one maybe seems a little warmer in the low mids. Pretty similar.
3.
There's definitely some more saturation on 3, a little fuzziness to it. Not too much, not over the top.
4.
Alright, there's a little more saturation going on there, a little distortion. Not quite as pleasing. Some nice saturation on that one. I like that one maybe the best so far of the saturated ones.
6.
This one's got a lot of articulation, a lot of definition. Not quite as warm sounding.
7.
7's nice. It's got a little more grit to it. It's nice. I'm having a tough time picking out my favorites, but I think I'm definitely leaning towards 5, 7, or 1. And the interesting thing to me about those is that those are the cleaner examples. All the others have a bit more saturation, maybe a little drive, or something in with the sound. But for whatever reason, I gravitated to the cleaner examples. Now, one of my pet peeves for bass, and especially in live situations for bass players, is where you just hear low end and you don't hear a lot of note definition. I feel like, all of these examples had really good note definition. 6 was probably my least favorite because it had tons of definition but no real meat or low end. So there is a balancing act there. But if I were going to go with my gut, I would probably say 5 was maybe my favorite. Maybe 5 or 7. But definitely 5, 7, and 1, which are the cleaner examples, were kind of what my ear gravitated towards. All right, time for the big reveal. Let's see what's what. Wow. Interesting enough, I picked out the most expensive one as my favorite. I picked the Noble. And my favorites were 5, 7, and 1. So we've got the Noble at $11.89, the Zod Tube DI at $6.99, and then the Radial JDI. I'm kind of impressed with myself, I guess, that I picked out the most expensive one. I don't know. That feels a little funny to say, but it is interesting to me that I was able to tell just in a quick time that was my favorite and it's the most expensive. It's also interesting to me that I picked out the Pyle as my least favorite, and that's the cheapest one on the list for $22. I guess you could say it does matter how much you spend on DIs to some extent. I mean, the Radial is still only $230. That's quite a deal compared to the other two that I picked out that were my favorite.
I think 2 is my favorite. It's a nice bass tone right off the bat. I don't think there's a lot going on EQ wise. I don't know. I feel like I'm listening to a bass rather than a DI. And number 1 feels that way also. Number 5 feels that way, but it's got more character, and it seems to saturate a little more, so that leads me to believe that it might be a tube DI. I guess 2 might also be I guess they could all be tube DIs, but number 5 sounds like one, and I love it. But I think 2 is my favorite because it's neutral, it's nice, it's hi-fi, yeah, I think 2 is my favorite. So let's see what they are. Ha! My favorite. I knew it. Okay, so number 1 is a Radial. I have 4 of those things in there. Oh, that's hilarious. Pyle. I will say the Pyle, number 6, I heard it and I was like, oh, that's some cool, lo-fi. I could hear that being on a War on Drugs record, or I could hear Tame Impala using something like that. Yeah, so my favorite, the Red DI, and then number 1, the Radial, and then number 5, the Noble. I love the Noble, and it's not even my favorite one. So there you go. That's music. That's bass. That's stuff that we all talk about a whole lot.
I went and saw a very respectable band that I will not mention by name, and I got to hang out with their bass player afterwards, and they're playing their past club gigs are in bigger places, not stadiums by any means, but they played center stage when I saw them, and it was packed.
Big rooms.
Big rooms, and the amp was an 8x10 SVT, and but it was on 1. There was literally nothing coming out of it, and I was like, dude, so what's the actual setup? This is clearly just a box to look cool. And he's like, it's literally just me through a Noble into the board.
Does it sound good?
Sounded great.
Does it matter? Does your direct box matter? And how much does it matter?
I think, again, it really just depends on the gigs you're doing. If you're trying to track a bunch of stuff, I wouldn't probably use anything but a Reddi or a Noble. I mean, obviously the Radial does fine, but it's passive, so that might not be what you're looking for. Again, if you're doing big, like that gig I was just talking about, you probably want something like a Noble.
My thoughts on this are, if you're a pro bass player and you're working and you're showing up to gigs and you're showing up to sessions and you are looking for the best quote-unquote DI, I mean, yeah, the Noble. To me, it was the most well-rounded. It was the sweetest sounding. But again, keep in mind, in the context of a mix, outlying 6, all of them sounded good. All of like your bass tone in the mix sounded great, and I couldn't hear with the drums and the other elements and everything. I don't know if it's the other frequencies of the other instruments are masking the subtleties of the DI, or my focus is just spread between the other instruments. But yeah, if I was a producer and you showed up with any of those except 6, and we got that sound, I'd go, yeah, that sounds great. Now, I will say, I like saturation on bass, and so the reason I didn't like 1 was because it was just the most bland sort of bass sound. It was just like, here's a bass. All the other ones, whether they had tubes or they were solid state, didn't matter. If it had saturation, I generally liked it. And then it was like, what's the character of the saturation? And the character of the saturation you're going for is dependent on the track and the context of the sound you're going for. Because sometimes, if you're going for more of a heavy rock kind of sound, a harder square wave type clipping is better for that. If you're going for more of like what that track was, the funk, like the context of that track, the softer clipping, smoother saturation work better. And that's why...
So much of it depends on the song.
Yeah.
And it also depends on where you're getting your saturation from.
Yes. So that's the thing. It's like if you would have just shown me a track that was a rock track, I very well could have picked a different one of those DIs from the solo track, because you would have primed me to think of a certain musical context.
Right.
I think if you've got the money to spend, the Noble outclasses these other DIs.
See, here's what I didn't tell you. My favorite 2 were the Noble and the Reddi. I liked the Reddi better, but I was recognizing like I like this color slightly better for myself.
Right.
But as a tool, the Noble is a better tool for the working bass player.
But you've also owned a Reddi before.
I have.
And you sold the Reddi, and you've told me that you regret selling the Reddi. So you have a past bias towards the Reddi.
That's why I'm asking you to blind test all my direct boxes.
The Noble sounds better. Like, it sounds better.
You think it sounds better?
I do. I think the difference in price is worth it for the Noble.
Well, here's what I was going to say. The fact that there's a built-in power supply, how much do you spend on a good power supply?
A lot. I mean,
what is it?
300. I mean, for a good isolated power supply.
What is that? $300?
Reliable, yeah, between $200 and $400.
Okay, so let's say $350.
Yeah.
So if we subtracted $1,200, you subtracted $350. You're now you leveled it out. And then there's also if they're totally equal, the size and the weight,
and the fact you have a 2-band EQ, which you don't have on a Reddi.
But I would also say, for the working bass player that can't like take a month's rent and put it towards a direct box, you can get the Radial. The Radial, that was number 1. That was the clean one. That was the one. It has a Jensen transformer in it. It's bomb proof. It's passive. It's totally fine.
I actually disagree with you here.
Yeah.
It's the Ampeg over the Radial for me. The Ampeg had the SCR-DI had more character. For $20 more, just getting an EQ and a control over your scrambler circuit and a blend knob is a way better use of your money than just the clean, straight-ahead Radial DI.
Okay. Well, and I'm going to say this. I don't know if this is going to go in the video. I personally just don't like the way the scrambler sounds.
That's fine, but you don't have to use it.
You don't have to use it, but I'm not going to use it. I would rather get my saturation somewhere else.
So even if you take the saturation out, though, you're spending $20 more and you're getting the EQ control, which you don't get on the Radial. So if you wanted EQ with a Radial, that's a whole other pedal you have to buy.
But the transformer in the Radial is better.
But it doesn't matter.
But it is. But it depends on what you're... But I think it's more versatile.
Your direct box doesn't matter, but it also does matter. It doesn't matter because in the context of a mix or on a gig, no one listening to you play is going to care what your direct box sounds like, except you. And that's where it matters, because you're going to know. If you saved up and you scraped the money together to get the Noble DI, and you're super stoked on it because it's the best sounding one out of all these, that can have an effect on how you approach something. And if we all know the feeling of like when your tone sounds really good and feels really good and you know you sound good, you play better. Like 100% of the time. So spending the extra money to get you to something that makes you feel like you sound better, I mean, I think that's worth it. If you're spending $200 or more, you're above the threshold, you're in the ballpark, you're doing the thing, and it comes down to personal preference. Just don't buy the Pyle.
The Pyle.
The pile of crap.
Does the direct box that you use actually matter? I think yes. What context are you playing music? Are you recording only, or are you on the road? And then also, what kind of music are you playing? And do you need other features as well besides just the basics of a direct box? Which a direct box at its core, it's doing two main things. It's converting a unbalanced signal to a balanced signal, and it's converting an instrument level signal to a microphone level signal. Any direct box is going to do those two things, but then also, do you want additional things like EQ? Do you want tube saturation? Do you want some sort of drive circuit? Do you want a power supply? Do you want these added bonuses? And each of those are going to add cost and weight. So it's hard to just say which one's the best. That's not really a fair question. It's more like, what sort of gigs are you doing and what's important to you? For the best overall of these 7, in terms of tone and weight and practicality and features, I kind of hate to say it because I was rooting for the Reddi. I'm going to go with the Noble. I think it's the best. I think it's, of all of these, it's the only one that seems like it was actually designed by musicians for musicians, or I should say more specifically, by bass players for bass players. It's an incredibly valuable tool. It's only 3 pounds. You can fit it in a guitar case. You can fit it in like a mono tick bag. It seems very sturdy. The build quality is good. It has a power supply. It has EQ. It has all of these great features. And it's, like I said, it's only 3 pounds, and it sounds really good. If you want versatility, I would go with the Colourbox. And I feel like the Colourbox deserves its own video because the Colourbox has so much nuance with what it can do. There's so many different options with tone and sound. We didn't really touch that in this video. I just kind of put like a mid-level saturation and just kind of plugged it in, and I thought it sounded pleasant. But like, you can get fuzz tones, you can get clean tones, you can get so much nuance. So if you're looking for something that's truly versatile and that is a great tone sculpting, tone changing sort of thing, I would go with the Colourbox. If you want something that you're just going to keep at home, you're just going to keep it in your recording studio, you want to know that when you plug in your bass, it's going to sound good and it's going to glue things together, I would go with either the Zod or the Reddi, depending on which color you prefer. And what we're liking is the tube saturation here, right? I think my favorite sound personally was the Reddi, but the best tool overall was the Noble. But also, the Noble was the most expensive. For the bass player that is on a budget, it's okay. If you can get, there's a threshold from that Pyle to that Radial. It's like $200 difference. If you can get to that tier, that Radial tier, where you have a good transformer, solid, reliable, passive direct box, you're fine. The only way anyone's really truly hearing the difference is when we're putting them all next to each other and comparing them, which is never going to be the case when you're playing music. So which one's the best? That's a bad question. That's not fair. It's what kind of gigs are you doing? What context are you playing music in? How much money do you have, and what's truly important to you? And at the end of the day, I think the things that matter more than these direct boxes are things like, how long are you letting your notes ring? Are you muting properly? How are you actually striking the string? These sort of questions have so much more to do with your tone, in my opinion, than which direct box you have. Does the direct box you use matter? Yes, but not really.
Just don't buy the Pyle, please.